How did Jamar Chase's return impact the way Kansas City defended Cincinnati? What did Cincinnati do to contain Travis Kelce? We get into the observations from the film with Mike on today's episode.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. Today we're joined by Mike at Bengals_Sans Santagata. You can find him on Twitter at Bengals_Sans for all of his film insights, some cool cut-ups, some cool clips as he does his Bengals film analysis. And that's what we're going to do today on this episode of Locked On Bengals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. You can find our podcast anywhere you get your podcast and on YouTube, where you can hit the subscribe button, where you can hit the thumbs up button. And if you're an audio listener, make sure you follow the podcast. We're delivered to your devices when we upload every day. Join the First Listen Club with thousands of other Bengals fans and be the smartest Bengals fan in your office. Today's episode of Locked On Bengals is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. And today, in our film takeaways episode of the Bengals Week 13 game against the Kansas City Chiefs, we're going to get into how Joe Burrow continues his torrid streak of hot, good, elite, great quarterbacking, whatever you want to call it, and how Jamar Chase's return impacted the way teams are defending the Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to get into the offensive line, which continues to improve, and the ever-raging debate amongst Bengals circles between Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon, and how this Bengals running game continues to keep things moving. Before we finish up the show with the Bengals defense finding those stops against Kansas City and what that means going forward, including their plan for Travis Kelce in this game, who did not have a great game. Probably his worst game of the year. Would have to go look statistically, but I imagine with the lost fumble in there, not a great game for Travis Kelce. But we start with the superstars, guys. Jamar Chase returns. Joe Burrow continues to play really well. And it was noticeable to me, Mike, how Kansas City was paying extra attention to Jamar Chase in this game. What did you see?
Oh, I mean, every team seems to this season. Like, they are hell-bent on that guy's not beating us over the top. That guy's not getting this explosive play. And you think of Kansas City. You think of the first game last year. Yeah, they're doubly saying, no way we're going to let Jamar Chase do what he did to us again. So goes for like 90 yards and doesn't matter. But he just, every time, whenever he's on the field, it's pretty much always going to be safety over the top of him. Whether or not there's a safety over the top on the other side, doesn't matter. If they want to play single high, he's going to be shaded to Chase. If they play too high, which is what they did in the majority of this game, they're going to keep cloud on him and then a safety over the top. They're going to try to jam him at the line and then have a guy over the top to let that guy really try to get physical with him. And it works to an extent because that is just so hard to beat two NFL athletes. But Jamar Chase is good and he's still going to get his. So it is just funny to see the difference in defenses, because they were getting some favorable looks, I think, the past couple of weeks when he wasn't playing. Mm-hmm. But this week, not a ton of favorable looks. And that's why Burrow only threw 3 balls over 20 yards down the field, just because they are really shell coverage of, like, you're going to try to beat us underneath and in the intermediate area.
A lot of quarters. Sorry, James. A lot of quarters, a lot of too high stuff from the Chiefs again. And even on one play, which JT O'Sullivan highlights, the corners bailing so hard, and maybe it's invert too, that a go becomes just nobody covering Jamar Chase in what looks like a cover 2 hole at one point. I thought that was pretty funny. Sorry, James. I just wanted to
it's all right. It's all right. You said you were going to start with the stars and you didn't, because Drew Chrisman is on the active roster, and that's where you should have started, is with
you're right.
the punter job. Signed, sealed, delivered. Drew Chrisman is the Bengals punter. Also, Tanner Hudson, tight end, signed to the practice squad. They released 4th rounder Tyler Shelvin from the practice squad. Still have a practice squad spot open. And the reason you add a guy like Tanner Hudson is because Hayden Hurst, well, he's expected to potentially miss this week, was doubtful for this week's game with that calf injury. So, with that said, now that we got the stars out of the way,
you're right. Hayden Hurst, absolute stud against Kansas City, has been very clutch and matters. I'm just going to throw out really quick. I think that the loss of Hayden Hurst matters because Burrow clearly trusted him and counted on him in some third down situations. And there was at least one scenario this week when I watched the tape where he had Mitch Wilcox, and I just don't know if that trust is there. We've seen Burrow get after Wilcox on a couple of plays where maybe he made a mental mistake. And so that's something to watch without having Hayden Hurst for that handful of plays he contributes every day. Not being sarcastic here, he definitely matters for this offense. So sorry, James. I just
For
wanted
sure.
to throw that out real quick.
No, he was going to have a huge game. I mean, he had 2 catches on the first drive, had that ball up the seam that, there's been some debate. I know you two went back and forth about it, but yeah, it's going to impact the offense. And so that's a bummer. Hopefully it's only a week or 2, or maybe not even. Maybe he has a miraculous recovery and that calf gets better ahead of Sunday's game against the Browns. Let's stick with Jamar Chase, Mike, because Jake was right to start with Jamar Chase. He is the superstar. He's the second most popular player on the team. If I looked at this film, and when you were watching this film, just straight up physically, was there any difference between this Jamar Chase and, say, the Chase pre-tackle in New Orleans, or the Chase even making game-winning plays after he did get injured in New Orleans, Atlanta, any of those times? Did it look like the same guy, or did he look any different to you? Because I know he was pretty winded, and he talked about his conditioning issues playing, 80% of snaps or whatever it was.
Yeah, I think he was about 95%, and that's nothing physically. That is, I think he was 100% physically. There's, I think, a little bit of rust and feel of the field is
sure.
a little bit of what I'm saying, because it felt like he got pushed out of bounds a little bit more than common. And, not that he's just getting jammed and thrown aside. It's just, I think he thinks there's a little bit more room over here. And then it's just like, oh, I'm running on the sideline type thing. And I think that just gets better. Probably will be perfectly fine this week. I think it's just like I haven't been on a field in a while. And then also, yeah, he probably was winded because I don't know the amount of cardio he's doing, and it was probably no running. But anyway, physically on the field, I think you could see from the jump, the literal jump when he made that catch and then made the hurdle and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That was very much a Jamar Chase looks 100% healthy play to me. I saw that. I saw the run after catch, the strength to make the guy miss. And the other play, the bubble screen to get the first down, another one that just showed his strength and his speed to make those guys miss with acceleration, and then to finish it with power, lowering his shoulder. He looks physically fine. He looks perfectly fine to me physically on the field. I think there's a little bit of rust type issue, not with his hands, at least. There were no drops, not like the preseason after he missed a whole year. But yeah, he's I think for the most part, he is perfectly healthy, and I think he is just as dynamic as ever.
Yeah, you saw that time and time again. First contact, having a hard time if it brings him down, but him running through some of that initial contact a few times as well. The one-handed catch on the sideline that didn't count, he continues to make, as I've said a few times, I think, the coolest catches that don't count. He's had a few of those this year. Go back to week 1 against Pittsburgh. I think I mentioned that earlier this week as well. And let's talk Joe Burrow's game. No deep balls for him this week, but the Bengals offense continuing to find those chunk plays, 15-plus yard plays this week, just coming a little bit more in the intermediate part of the field, the short part of the field in terms of where he's targeting downfield. Did you see any big differences in Burrow's game this week, or is it a continuation of some of the things we've talked about where he's playing clean, he's playing on time, he's playing smart, and we're seeing that elite pinpoint accuracy we've kind of gotten accustomed to with Burrow?
Clean, on time, smart. I mean, this was very much the Chiefs aren't going to let him beat you over the top. He only took a couple chances. And other than that, he just, okay, you're going to play like that. I'm going to beat you up and down the field in the intermediate area. He wasn't taking a bunch of check. He had a few. Something that Tom Brady and the really high-level quarterbacks do, you get to that check down on time. It's not nobody's there. Let me just let the running back take this hit. I think we've seen that a lot where the running back just catches the ball as a guy's about to slam into him. When you get the ball to the running back before those guys are coming down on him, he can make some moves, and that's what P. Ryan was able to do this week. But, yeah, just took everything the defense gave him. He didn't force much. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 throws that were a little bit forced. The deep ball to T is in my mind. But for the most, 90% of the time, just makes the perfect read, makes the perfect throw. Awesome accuracy. I mean, just overall, I thought he just did a perfect job of being on time, moving the ball down the field. This is the Bengals offense that they said couldn't happen. It's the Bengals offense that methodically marches down the field. They don't need these explosive plays to get their points. It's just, and they still got one from Jamar Chase on the intermediate target. But, this is what they couldn't do last year, which was when teams back off and say, we're not allowing anything, he is patient enough to take 10, 15-yard gains all the way down the field.
And he has the protection, which is where we should go next, along with one of those checkdowns, Samaje Perine. Let's continue to talk offense. Let's talk about the big uglies and a guy who plays like a big ugly a lot of the times with Samaje Perine, who stiff-armed Justin Reed to the moon. And clearly Justin Reed's delusional based on his Twitter on Tuesday, what he tweeted. Anyways, this show brought to you by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want wherever you want it from a community of local hosts. And it's not just in the US, even though, of course, if you travel anywhere around the US, you can use it, but UK, Canada, Australia. So when I visit Jake, no, we're not taking that Mercedes that Jake has. No, we are going to use Turo and get something a little sportier because, well, actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to use Turo to get a Daewoo, Jake. That's what we're going to do. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. So every trip backed by liability insurance, terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive, aka the Daewoo, at Turo.com.
I'm going to have to get a Daewoo sponsorship as well. James, you mentioned the offensive line, who have, by most metrics, by most film analyses, come together a little bit as the season's gone on. They're not perfect, obviously. Cordell Volson, I mentioned on yesterday's show, for those of you that missed it, and 4 out of these 5 Bengals offensive linemen were not charged with a pressure allowed, according to Pro Football Focus's charting. And Lel Collins, the exception to that rule. He was charged with a few pressures. And on film review, Volson wasn't perfect. He got beat a couple times, especially early by Chris Jones, but he also got the best of Chris Jones a few times, even in one-on-one situations. And so if you can kind of go toe-to-toe with Chris Jones a little bit in your Cordell Volson, that's a positive. But overall, you look at this Bengals win streak, you look at Joe Burrow, we've talked about how well he's played over that period of time and why he's played so well over that period of time. A big part of this is sack prevention, and that's somewhat Burrow, and some of that is that he's not being pressured as much. In that 4-game win streak, guys, according to PFF numbers anyway, he's been pressured on just 22.8% of his dropbacks. That's the second least in the NFL. And I think even more important than that, one of the big complaints, one of the big knocks on Joe Burrow early this year, is that he's taking too many sacks that he can avoid. The sack conversion rate of those 22.8% of plays that are pressured is just 14.7%. So he is avoiding sacks. He's been sacked just 5 times in those games. One of them was that weird sack at the end of this game. That was not a good play for him. But the sack prevention has come a long way. And some of that's Burrow, and some of that's this offensive line. And Mike, when you watch them on tape, is it true improvement in your opinion? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it is true improvement from a lot of the guys. You think of, especially early on, Lyle Collins, that was way off the product that they were promised from Dallas. But now he's still not what he was in Dallas, but he is a starting level right tackle now. Alex Kappa has been pretty consistently pretty good the entire time, and Ted Karras about the same. But Jonah Williams, he came in rusty, and he has legitimate improvement so far this season. There was that small stretch there, hiccup, definitely after the injury, that I think he lost a little bit, but it seems like he's healthier now and he's playing up to a pretty good level. Not that he faced the highest quality of competition, but he did do what he had to do. I mean, he gave up a sack to a 7th-round rookie against the Browns, so it's improvement to get to where you're not allowing any pressures, at least according to PFF. And then Volson, early on in the season, he was definitely the liability. It's like, okay, we got to protect him. Not that he's terrible, but just we got to protect him. He's a rookie. He's a late 4th-round pick. Now it just feels like he's got more confidence. He's able to play faster. The game's slowing down a tiny bit. Yeah, he still gets beat once in a while. He's a rookie. Chris Jones is he'll baptize any rookie. It's just he's the pastor. But so he did a good job one-on-one with him. And then I thought the Bengals actually had a really good plan for Chris Jones too, because a lot of eyes on Chris Jones. It felt like their protections were a little bit less set for the front they were getting, and a little bit more set to we're sliding the center towards Chris Jones. And then even on one play I remember specifically, Jonas guy drops out and he looks out first just to make sure there's not a guy coming off there. I snap inside to Chris Jones right after, and he saves Burrow a hit because Jones was about to beat Folsom.
Burrow's mentioned running lanes in recent weeks, and obviously we've noticed him run more. But why is that? Can you explain that? Like what this offensive line is doing, why Burrow is able to slide or move and get upfield? Because that's like a sneaky weapon now. Because when he gets, I'm going to say it, when he gets downhill and gets moving, he can move a little bit and he can pick up some yards. And he's actually sliding outside of the one run where he took like 3 hits. And it was like, oh, all right, don't be injured. And he was okay. But outside of that one the other day, he's been sliding well, and he does the Joe Mixon, man, where he drops the ball. So how much of that has to do with this offensive line?
A lot of celebration mimicry. Sorry, Mike. A lot of celebration mimicry on this team, from the gritties to the first down celebrations.
It's because they're good at celebrating, right?
So, Chris Evans in the end zone, pretty good celebration as well. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead and answer the question.
That Chris Evans one was a classic. The ball won't come off his hand. But also would prefer Burrow not to do that spin at the end, because that was a wildly frightening move for a fan.
and dangerous from like a ball security perspective in some ways. But anyway.
Yeah, you're taking that hit there. Just avoid it. Fall down. But anyway, so what's happening here is that last year when these guys would lose, Hakeem Adeniji at guard of last year, the experiment at right tackle, Trey Hopkins at center, when they lose, they're losing and the guy is fully behind them and they're either chasing after or they got their head down, like don't know what happened. And that's way harder to get a running lane when you've got a free runner, was what I'll call these, these free runners. I think of that a little bit as like, blitzers that can be free runners when they don't get picked up. But these are almost free runners, defensive tackles and defensive ends. Now, when these guys lose, I still have leverage, just work around me. And that is the difference between a bad and an average offensive line. When you have an average offensive line, they're going to lose, sure, but they're going to stay attached. And they're going to give Burrow a chance to make them right. Mm-hmm. And I think that was something he didn't really get last year. He got sometimes, when Jonah Williams would lose, it would be like that. It would be, I'm getting beat a little bit to the inside. Could you slide? Can you slide left? So this guy's out of the play. But, when it was a lot of the other guys, it was a lot of, my coach, I remember when I was way back, my first time ever making a start in 7th grade, I completely whiffed. And my coach said that was a lookout block. And I was like, what's that? You just yelled, look out. Watched him go. There were a lot of lookout blocks last year.
I bet you threw a lot of those in your time.
No, I actually got pretty good. Pass blocking was my forte. I can't pull. I could never pull. Everything just moves so fast when I'm running full speed. But I got good at pass protection.
I think Cordell Volson's a good example of this in some ways, where he will lose initially sometimes, but he will stay attached and try to push his guy past Joe Burrow's spot and give Burrow an opportunity to step around it. I've seen that from Volson in particular a couple of times. He's not often totally out of a play. So good point there. And kind of speaking of running lanes, a lot of talk about Samaje Perine, and the running game has continued to be consistent, even in the absence of Joe Mixon. Nothing really like their Week 9 performance against Carolina. Here's my take on all this stuff. The way Perine is played means that you can put Perine on the field a little bit more, and it's not a tell anymore, right? It's not he's in the game, they're passing, they like him as a pass blocker. Maybe every now and then he'll get a draw. He's shown that he can run everything pretty well that they would ask Joe Mixon to do. But I'm still not taking Joe Mixon off the field necessarily a ton more than I would have before this stretch from Samaje Perine. I think that this is what you would hope you would get from a functional backup when you have a good running game going. Mike, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts are Joe Mixon is still the starter to me. I think Perine does a pretty good job when he's in there, but he really does remind me of like I don't mean to say it that way, but he kind of reminds me of a fullback, because there's no what's the ceiling on a run play? What's the explosion? He's making guys miss and he still goes down at 8 yards. Like I think his longest run of Sunday was 9 yards. And I think that's fine. And picking up about 4 or 5 yards a chunk is good. That's good football. But Mixon can actually break one, and work all the way down the field. I don't know. That's a bit of my take. But the other thing is I think that Mixon gets a really bad rap because he had to take so many carries when nothing was working. I think he's been pretty good since the scheme change. In fact, I remember I did the math. He was at 5 yards a carry after the scheme change, including that Pittsburgh game where he's under 3 yards a carry and everything else. I know that it's a big Panthers one. Panthers were a pretty good run defense before that game. So I think that Mixon is the guy. But yes, like you said, this means that P. Ryan can come in and actually spell him and not just like a 3rd down, 2-minute situation. This is Joe Mixon was, I think, 3rd in carries before around the bye week. And now that means like, no, Mixon doesn't have to be anywhere near there. He could be like 10th, 12th, 15th in carries. Like this could be a true 60-40 type committee because P. Ryan has shown the ability to do this. But I also don't think this is time for P. Ryan to take the reins and Mixon to be just a pass catching back, but not the pass blocking back. I don't know. I've seen some ideas on Twitter and I just think like, yeah, Mixon's still the guy for me personally. I think the run game hits its apex. It's at its best when Mixon is the starter.
Joe Mixon is good at football. What a take. I'm not knocking you, by the way. It's just wild, some of the takes out there. I agree with you, Mike. Up next, we'll switch gears. We'll talk defense. Today's show brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all things betting info, stats, news, analysis. If you're trying to wager, if you want to wager, if you're thinking about wagering on Joe Burrow for MVP, oh man, the hype train. Well, it's going. It's picking up steam. And well, your Locked On Bengals favorite hosts are probably on that train, and you can wager on that at BetOnline. You could also wager on the Bengals to win the AFC North. I know their odds jumped this week, especially with Lamar Jackson expected to miss 1 to 3 weeks with a PCL. AFC Championship, maybe win it all. You can wager on all of those things and so much more. It's not just NFL, NBA, college football, college hoops, and more at BetOnline. Head to their website today. Sign up for free. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Defense. They gave up some points to Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, but they contained that passing game in a very significant way. They contained Travis Kelce in a very significant way. I'd be curious to see if these teams played again, if there may be more emphasis on the running game, even though these teams both have these crazy passing offenses. They both ran it really well in this game to the point where, you could have even said maybe Kansas City had some opportunities to run when they didn't. But when you have the quarterbacks that these teams have and the systems that these teams have, it's a pretty tough argument to make. That being said, the Bengals defense did contain the Chiefs passing game, did contain Travis Kelce. Mike, what was it? What was the plan for Travis Kelce in particular? Because obviously without Tyreek Hill, he's the guy to worry about for Kansas City. It seemed like they weren't worried about the run, and so Kansas City's running game was successful because the Bengals were worried about the pass. But let's focus on the approach for Travis Kelce.
Felt to me like the approach to Travis Kelce was to pay a lot of attention to him. Now that Tyreek Hill's not there, I saw plenty of maybe this coverage doesn't normally have the bracket on Kelce, like a one robber type coverage, but that guy's got eyes on Kelce. And he's like, okay, if he's intermediate, I'm taking him. And I thought there were really design brackets as well. Just a lot of Travis Kelce isn't going to beat us in this game. You're going to have to do it with somebody else. I do think there were opportunities for him. I think of that deep ball that Von Bell breaks up. They blitzed plenty. Like teams don't want to blitz Kansas City. They were doing it. And I think that's a high variance way to live. But hey, teams weren't playing man coverage against Kansas City last year, and now they are. And Lou Anarumo was the guy that wasn't scared to in the AFC Championship game. So I think he does defy some of the rules about trying to defend this team, and he just goes like, why not? And then sends whatever he wants. Got beat a little bit on those blitzes, but those blitzes worked at times. And then to go with that, I believe they're the number one team in drop 8. They still have that. They still have that they can pull out. It's similar a little bit to the offense where we didn't think it was sustainable to keep hitting go balls because of the defensive changes. It probably wasn't sustainable to just drop 40% of snaps in this game, but it's still in there when they need it. So they can pull that out on a key third down like they did in this game where Sam Hubbard's at spy. Joseph Osai beats Orlando Brown inside. That was a terrible rep from Brown. I don't know if he thought he had help from the running back, but beats him inside, causes the pressure. Hubbard actually overcommitted, but Osai is able to come back and make the play. And that was the same exact coverage that they used against the Chiefs where Hubbard came in with that sack. So I don't know. They're also very disciplined in their rushing lanes. This is not a Kelce thing, but that's just also a reason that they're doing well. I think back to when they play Lamar Jackson. I think that helps them when they play against Patrick Mahomes, who likes to not run, but escape and play backyard football. They don't let him do that as much. I don't know. I think their plan for Kelce was kind of what we would think. It's just that keying in on Travis Kelce there, know where he is at all times. And we're going to keep safety kind of over him, but more so they'll bring a safety down to take away the intermediate area. They're not so much worried about him flying 30 yards downfield, but they don't want him to smoke the underneath guy, Trey Flowers, Dax Hill, Von Bell, and then not have somebody there to pick up the slack.
Going into this game, it was okay. Chidobe Awuzie is out, and you've been able to hold up against the Titans, and you've been able to hold up against the Panthers. But this is different with Patrick Mahomes. How did Cam Taylor-Britt, how did Eli Apple, how did these cornerbacks hold up given the pass first nature of the Chiefs offense?
I think Eli Apple held up really well in coverage. I think Cam Taylor-Britt was up and down a little bit, and that's just his highs were higher. He almost had a pick. I mean, that was a really nice job to play.
He should have had a pick. Oh,
should have.
Oh,
Bates ran into him trying to make the same play. It's just unfortunate. But yeah, he should have had a pick, playing great cloud technique. I mean, if anything, Lou Anarumo gets every corner to come in here and be able to bait these quarterbacks into making throws they can't make against cover two, because these cloud corners just do such a good job of breaking on that. But yeah, Cam Taylor-Britt did a great job on that play. I guess the thing I wanted to see that would make me think Cam Taylor-Britt had a great game was the one, and it was a tough play, but getting that tackle on Juju could have really given the Bengals control of that game in that moment, because Kansas City probably punts, or I think that was third down. Kansas City might punt, or maybe it was fourth down. It was fourth down. I knew the Bengals would get the ball back. So it's probably turnover on downs in a great spot.
Yep.
And if he makes that tackle, but oh well, it is what it is. Juju gets paid to be a good player too. He got paid by Kansas City because he can make short yardage moves and get that extra 2 yards to get the first down. So, offense gets paid, defense gets paid. Sometimes they just win. I thought he played pretty well, but I thought Eli Apple actually played well, like not just pretty well or pretty good. Like he played good. That was a good performance from him. And that's the third time in a row, I think Eli Apple has played the Chiefs well.
You mentioned the contain and the discipline in the rush lanes. That was something that I tweeted about on Sunday night after I was thinking back on the game. There were only a handful of plays when he gets outside of the pocket. One of them didn't count. It was a 3rd and 15 conversion nullified by an illegal man downfield. The Chiefs offensive line staying engaged with some guys 3 yards down the field, maybe thinking Mahomes is going to scramble there. And outside of that opportunity, when he did break the pocket, he didn't have that elusiveness. Trey Hendrickson chased him into some throwaways, and some other guys did too. So that is something that's going to matter, especially in these AFC playoffs. And you think about the way the Bengals put their defense together. They put it together with the Chiefs in mind, with the Ravens in mind, I think with the Bills in mind, although they've lost Cheeto now. So, that Stephon Diggs, we'll talk about that matchup in the future. But the quarterbacks in the AFC that are threatening for the Bengals are mostly these guys that like to break, contain, play backyard football a little bit. And I think that's just such an important factor that has to remain consistent. And maybe Bengals fans are a little bit frustrated this year because they haven't had the sack production that they had last year. They're back near the bottom of the league in sack production. But I think that despite that, the defensive line and the pass rush, yes, they could use a little bit more in terms of sack production, but they've played pretty well this year doing what they're asked to do and playing within the structure of the defense. And that kind of goes to the whole idea of the defense playing with that discipline and cohesion on the whole. Am I wrong in that assumption, Mike?
No, I think that this team likes guys that must rush and keep contained when they do it. It's also, I think, a reason they might have gone BJ Hill over Larry Ogunjobi, because BJ Hill will do that. Larry Ogunjobi likes to gamble, and that's why he comes away with a lot of sacks. But he also will give up a rushing lane and allow the quarterback to escape or step up into the pocket. So good player, but I think the way they prefer to play defense is the way BJ Hill plays, and what right or wrong. I do think that the Trey Hendrickson thing, not only did he do a good job of contain, he had a really good game. I thought he beat Orlando Brown quite a bit, and he didn't come away with a sack, but a couple quarterback hits, the real infamous, chase him everywhere around the field till he throws away the ball. But he had a great game. I think Orlando Brown's a pretty good left tackle, and he didn't look like it.
All right.
Very
good. Very good. Good game for Trey Hendrickson. I agree with that. Sam Hubbard also had that very, very clean pass rush win to get a sack, and that was a pretty important play in this game. The sacks that they did have against Patrick Mahomes, again, were very big sacks. And again, there's something to me about this game that really instills confidence in this team for what they're doing to be sustainable going forward, the way they're winning on offense, the tools in their toolkit on offense, their cohesion and variability and ability to be multiple on defense. I think these things really bode well for the future, set a high ceiling, and really that's all you can ask for in the NFL, especially this year. We've said it many, many times, continues to be a very week-to-week league, and it's going to be that way again with the Browns coming up this week. But they've got all these pieces that can do a whole lot of different things. And I think for good reason, Bengals fans should continue to be feeling confident right now. And that was my feeling after the game, continues to be my feeling after watching the tape and talking about it with you guys. So that being said, we're going to transition tomorrow to focus on the Bengals Week 14 opponent, the Cleveland Browns, coming to Cincinnati, and another big game, as they all are, especially now that the Bengals are fighting for that number 1 seed, at least until they're not, or until they clinch it. Until next time, Bengals fans, when we will be crossing over with Locked On Browns as we get into that matchup. Thanks for listening to the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.